we did not have sex, and that I was kind of following the belief systems of that purity ring and that commitment
Mm-hmm.
to God and to my father. So at 15, I went to pick up a girlfriend at a party. I was driving, and I went to the party. It was like a college party, and we were like freshmen, I think, or maybe sophomores at that point. And I couldn't find her. And, I was totally sober. I was the designated driver. So I'm walking around the house trying to find her. And she called me really intoxicated. And so this guy was like, "Oh, I think I know who your friend is." And he led me up the stairs and into a room and shut the door. And that was that. He proceeded to, touch me.
Hello, everyone. I am your host, Lion, and I believe that we have a great opportunity to more fully understand and appreciate some of the sexual trauma that women have had to endure and continue to endure. The frequency of this trauma might vary depending on where in the world one might reside, but I believe this is still an area where more sexual trauma is inflicted upon women. I also believe that we need to be exposed to more stories of how some women choose not to be defined by their trauma and to use it as fuel on the path to their greatness. Chelsea is one such great example who not only has transcended so much, but serves as a beacon of hope and empowerment for other women. Please join us as we learn from Chelsea's path. I am so excited to introduce you all to Chelsea. Chelsea grew up a middle child in a rough neighborhood where she was, exposed to around prostitution as well as gang violence. Her immediate home environment, including her father, grappled with alcoholism, and her parents grappled with an abusive relationship which affected Chelsea's home environment. Her older sister grappled with mental health challenges. And as a result of these trials and tribulations very early on in life, Chelsea made a promise that she would not rock the boat, that she would be a good girl, the best girl. And so she excelled in school and her first love, if you will, gymnastics. She experienced a lot of non-sexual violent trauma as well growing up where she did, and was forced to move out of her house at the very tender age of 15 to fend for herself. However, this was after she had her first experience with violent sexual trauma. And it did not stop there. Throughout her young life, she experienced sexual assault on more than a handful of times, which we can't even begin to imagine how it traumatized her. This led her to exist in a constant state of survival mode where she started to, act in ways which were constantly rooted in flight or flight. And when she finally realized how she was grappling with all of this trauma, began her long healing journey. And it took a lot of work over the years. And today it's led her to a place where she helps other women in supporting their healing journey, as well as seeking out training in this regard to be a trauma specialist. How did we do, Chelsea? Is there anything that you would like to add to that?
No, I mean, I think anything that was missed will be brought up.
Yep. Fantastic. So before we dive into it, can you please share with us the story of how you and I met?
Yes.
For the audience.
Yes. So I was in Nevada City. That's where we met. I went to a spoken word night, and Lion was hosting. And actually, there's a part of the story I haven't told you, Lion, but you were up on stage, and one of your poems was about the masculine feminine healing. And I am in the midst of writing my masculine feminine healing course. And so your poem really impacted me. And I'm like, yes, there's brothers out here who are doing this work, who are speaking about it, and so eloquently as you do. So that was the first draw to you. And then at the end, you mentioned an online platform for storytelling that you facilitate for people all around the world to tell their stories. And immediately I got the ping to come approach you and introduce myself, and offered an idea of sharing birth stories. I'm a birth worker, and I have access to a lot of people from all over the world that have very different birth stories. Everyone's is so unique, and so I thought that could be something special that we collaborate on. And said yes. Very enthusiastic.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what's so amazing is that usually in a lot of these episodes, I'm usually the one who goes up to, these people, and what's so uncharacteristic is how you approached me. So kudos to your courage for coming up to a total stranger, and look where it has brought us. So thank you for that. As we dive a bit deeper into your childhood, could you help us understand, because one of the things that really stood out to me was how you were very quiet as a very young girl, and so the background of that, and when you finally found your voice around the age of 10, how that was a very interesting experience. So I'd love to begin there.
Yeah, so I was definitely described as a child as like mute, very shy. It's interesting though, because I didn't actually feel shy. I remember witnessing and just choosing not to speak. So I didn't feel like timid, but that was how I was described. But I was born with some ear issues, and I had ear surgeries, and so it was like I was hearing underwater. And so I think that was what initiated the, not talking, because it was loud. I was hearing things really distorted. And so I got my ears fixed, but after that, I was still just really silent. I was an observer, is how I was described as well. I took everything in. They could tell I was smart, they could tell I was really on it, and I was really smart in picking things up, but I just wouldn't talk. So my experience with my household, my family are yellers. The yelling was the thing. It was very loud. The TV was always on. There was a ton of yelling, and that for me was super overwhelming. Coming into this world for years without being able to hear all the way to hearing all the way, and having it just really affect me. So I would actually stay up at night. I was like, I had insomnia and I was like a cat, and I would go around the house, like crawl around the house at night because it was so quiet and it was the only time it was peaceful. And so my mom would find me like sleeping behind the couch or like under the coffee table or whatever. She would just find me random places because I would kind of venture out at night. It was quiet, and that's what I needed. I needed quiet. So yeah, that was kind of where all of that started. So I was, my house was really chaotic and my environment was really chaotic. And so I made a decision really actively, probably around first grade. I remember this specifically because I remember my teacher at the time, that I was just going to be the best student, the best child, the best daughter. And I would put at attention and like just, just be the best I could be. So I found gymnastics at 3 years old and I became obsessed with it. And, I'm in so much gratitude for my parents because they actually were driving gymnastics like away every day. Because I was just so in love with it, and it wasn't something available in our community. So they were really, committed to allowing me to do something that I loved. And that for me was the discipline and the structure that really lacked at home. So I loved everything about it. I didn't have to talk. I perform. It's all about discipline. So, and that's really what I my life. I needed that sense of discipline and structure. So, that was definitely a saving grace for me.
Yeah. There was a turning point around the age of 10 where you were no longer willing to be as quiet, mute as you were.
Yeah. So I had a moment where I remember really actively being really angry, just really angry. I had this rage in me. I started just getting over it, just getting over everything that was going on in my house. And I freaked out. I started screaming at the top of my lungs, and I made this conscious decision. Like, I remember like the day, like it was like leading up to this moment where I was just like, okay, I'm gonna scream. I'm gonna say everything I want to say. I'm just gonna like, and I did. I mean, I was like, they yell at this level, I'm going to this level. And so I did. And so the reaction to that, because also I was kind of, the forgotten one, in the sense that I didn't get a lot of attention in the way that my sisters did, because we had the baby, and then we had my older sister who caused a lot of, trouble for the family. And so I was the good one and I was the quiet one. And so I kind of got pushed to the side in a lot of ways. And so I decided I would act like my older sister, but amplified. And so I screamed and I freaked out. And the reaction was, my parents actually brought out the video camera and videotaped me losing it. And they were all laughing and mocking me. And it definitely was not the attention that I expected to get. Seeing the attention when my elder sister would throw fits or my baby sister would throw fits, much different than that. So that was a big trauma win for me. Absolutely. Just finally expressing myself, obviously in a totally unhealthy way, but just like really getting there and having them video it, being mocked and being laughed at.
And I believe one of the things that you shared was even your mother's observation to your father about how there was a disparity in how he treated your older sister compared to you. Are you able to paint a picture of, how that disparity and your older sister's mental health challenges sort of further exacerbated your sort of existence at that age in the house?
Yeah. So my older sister struggled with a lot of depression and suicide. So that, and I understand now, obviously, as an adult, that when you have a child that is threatening or attempting suicide, you're kind of walking on eggshells with that child. So it would be a lot of, we all knew that she was suffering so badly. So it was like, oh, Chelsea, just deal with that, or like don't make a fuss about this or that, because she's sick, essentially. Or it was a lot of one-sided. Everyone really just wanted to cater to that, and I understand why that must have been terrifying as parents.
Yeah.
To deal with a young woman in that state. But I definitely got pushed to the back burner because of that in every way. And I know my father was really close with her. She was the first daughter, and so they were really close. And then she really rejected him and started hating him and pushing him out. And so he was always trying to make it up to her and show up for her and, take her to ball games and like do things with her. And I didn't have that connection. I really wanted that connection with my father, but it just wasn't available. And my dad has actually said recently to me, like, he's like, I don't really remember that much because you were always quiet or you were at gymnastics. And so I didn't really remember me having, like, some of the traumas that I have. He is an alcoholic, so he was pretty drunk most of my childhood and my life. So there's that. But also I tried to be incognito and not cause a stir in our family.
Thank you for bringing up your dad, because it provides a good segue into, as part of your dad trying to overcome his alcoholism, he turned towards religion. How, if you could provide some more background in how that changed the dynamic within your house and your perception within that.
Yeah. In our household, there weren't very many rules or boundaries, or it was kind of a free-for-all. We were all really, we were all really good kids. And, but yeah, we weren't disciplined in the sense of, a parent-child relationship. So when my dad found Jesus as a born-again Christian and went down that rabbit hole, and was sober for, I think, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, but then went back into alcohol and still held these beliefs really strongly. And, people use the term like Bible thumper or whatever. He was very passionate about spreading the word of Jesus Christ. So all of a sudden in our household, there were these rules, especially around sexuality. It was, you have to stay pure. And there, my father gave us all a purity ring at some point. I think we were in 13, we all got our purity ring. And it was a vow that we would not have sex before marriage. And I was actually always very in tune with my own spirituality. I have journals from when I'm like 8 years old talking about feeling the love of God in the ocean, and like just so I was very spiritual. So and my father is as well, and he always has been, but going down that really strict, like, Jesus is the way path, a big toll on my life, where I got very resentful, where like I kind of had my thing going. I was in gymnastics, I did my thing, and then all of a sudden there's these like strict rules around certain things, and I'm really resentful. Not to mention, it was like I couldn't go to the grocery store without my dad preaching to every single person, it was really intense, and I just got angry.
Yeah, I can imagine how draining it must be to have to endure that at a simple grocery store run. But I think thank you for sharing that, because I think, you know, your sort of dad's relationship with religion uh, is a very important part of the context um, of what happened at the age of 15, your first experience with sexual trauma.
Mhm.
Can you share the story of, that night and what happened?
Yeah, so I had been in a relationship with my boyfriend
Mm-hmm.
in high school, and I was a freshman, he was a senior, and super sweet guy. And I had this very strict thing embedded into me and programmed into me, like, we cannot have sex before marriage. And so I was really holding that. And I remember actually there was one time where we sat down with a calendar and we're like, let's pick out the date we're going to get married when I'm 18, kind of thing. And he was very respectful of that. And so we did not have sex. And that I was kind of following the belief systems of that purity ring and that commitment
Mm-hmm.
to God and to my father. So at 15, I went to pick up a girlfriend at a party. I was driving, and I went to the party. It was like a college party, and we were like freshmen, I think, or maybe sophomores at that point. And I couldn't find her. And, I was totally sober. I was the designated driver. So I'm walking around the house trying to find her. And she called me really intoxicated. And so this guy was like, "Oh, I think I know who your friend is." And he led me up the stairs and into a room and shut the door. And that was that. He proceeded to, touch me, kiss me, attack me. I had a skirt on. He kind of immediately started like with, feeling me up. And then, yeah, that was how I lost my virginity. So that was my first rape experience. And after that, I just felt, you know, there was so much around that commitment for me. I mean, I felt like I failed God. I felt like I failed my father. I felt like I had cheated on my partner. And so I totally gave up on myself. I actually went to my partner. I did tell him what happened, and he was supportive as much as like an 18-year-old guy can be, or a 17-year-old guy can be. But I immediately had sex with him because I'm like, well, now I'm ruined, so we might as well just do this. And so it started this spiral of like, I am a tainted woman, and
Yeah.
my mother actually never asked me how I lost my virginity or if I had lost my virginity. I mean, there was zero conversation around anything like that in our house. So, yeah.
Yeah. And as a result of this experience, how did it impact your relationship with your father, and ensuing sort of dynamic as a result? And yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, for me, the anger and the resentment just grew from there.
Mm.
And when I was very distant from them, and
Mhm.
pretty much stayed at my boyfriend's house at that point. And when we broke up, and I just wanted nothing to do with them. I was ashamed. I knew that there wouldn't be any understanding. There wasn't. Um, there wasn't. When they did find out, there was no understanding around it. And so I decided I needed to get out of there. that I had been taking
Mm-hmm.
care of myself. And, you know everything when you're a teenager. So I was pretty confident that I would be fine in the world. And I went into the principal's office and asked what I had to do to graduate. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I only needed like 1 or 2 credits. And so I finished that and I was out. I just needed to go. And I would say I really like hated my father for quite a while. We didn't um really reconcile our relationship until my late 20s, and now he
Mm-hmm.
and I are so close. He's one of my best friends. I love him so dearly, but it took a long time.
Yeah. And I can't imagine sort of the sort of circumstances around sort of having to undergo the sexual trauma that you experienced, and then to have the kind of family environment that you describe, to feel so isolated that it would force you to leave the San Diego area, which is where you grew up,
Mm-hmm.
and move to, I guess, Long Beach at that
Mm-hmm.
time. Let's fast forward a bit, because you were, in that area for a few more years until you moved to Boston.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that when we were talking, I was quite surprised by Boston. Could you share with the audience what drew you to Boston?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to kind of briefly describe the segment in Long Beach because that, you know, that was a big one, and it kind of caused the move to Long Beach, or I mean, to the East Coast.
Yeah.
But I ended up really going out into the world without any tools and having to figure it out, and that landed me in a series of relationships with men that were very, very abusive. I ended up in the hospital. Um, I was abused in many ways during those years. So, my thing, I was really kind of programmed with, oh, you're the pretty one, you're the trophy wife. These are things that my father would say. You better find a good man to take care of you, because that, and it wasn't like college wasn't in the conversation, or what I would be when I grew up wasn't in the conversation. It was like, your life is lined out, you need to find a man. And so I
Mm,
really was playing off of that. That was my goal, was to find a man to support me. And I kept, finding men in these really rough areas that were gangsters, that were, they were rough men. So there was a lot of trauma there. And then from there, I decided, okay, this is it. I need a new start, totally fresh start. So I moved to Boston with $300 and a suitcase.
mm,
And it was the middle of March, and I had never even seen snow or felt cold in my life. So I had like a hoodie, sweatshirt, and
mm.
jeans. Like, I didn't have any gear. And I remember getting there and just trying to like walk to the grocery store from the apartment and just like, oh my gosh, what have I done? But yeah, that started like a 9-year journey on the East Coast.
Yeah. And just for clarification, the narrative of the trophy wife, can
Mm-hmm.
you clarify who was feeding that to you?
It was kind of the joke of the family.
Mm,
My my sisters would like introduce me to people as the pretty sister, and my dad would do this thing at the dinner table where he would ask everyone questions like, who's the
mm,
president, and like, do these like questions. And my
mm,
older sister is very intelligent, and so it became the joke where he would ask me a question and then he'd interrupt and be like, oh, what's 2 + 2? Can you answer that one? And like things like this. So it was really
mm,
like embedded in me that I was the pretty one. And my dad would say, like, you're going to be a trophy wife. You're going to be the trophy wife. Like, you're going to find a man who's going to take care of you. And so that was, you know, as much as I thought I was like running against that, like, no, I'm going to do it all on my own. I was always searching for that as my goal, as my endpoint. Like, I didn't have a clear vision on career opportunities or what do I want to be. It was always like, where is that relationship? When it, you know, where is this man? So yeah, that was really embedded, and it played a massive part in my life for sure.
And probably the decisions you made as a result of this programming, very deep programming that you speak of. So thank you for sharing that. I want to talk about New York. You were 24 when you moved to New York. As you described it,
Yeah.
you were on cloud nine. You were a dancer, a gymnast. You took some theater choreography. And I remember when we were talking, you described that part of your life when you first moved to New York as you felt like you could do and be anything.
Mm-hmm.
So could you help us understand, and you know, so for the audience, New York and soon after you moved to New York, set the stage for what I will call the most difficult sort of sexual trauma experience that you had to undergo.
Mm-hmm.
So could you paint us a picture of that time leading up into sort of your experience?
Yeah. Yeah, New York is a very passionate, beautiful, art-filled place, and I, you know, it was pretty simple for me to find an apartment and to get on my feet there, get a job. I felt like I was Forrest Gump. I was just running into these situations that, you know, I wasn't necessarily even qualified for, and it would be like, here, like, do, you know, come have this job, or it just felt like magic through and through. Um, and so I was moving out of my apartment and looking for another apartment. And do you want me to go into the story of that situation?
Whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm ready to speak to it. I think it's important. Um, and with this, you know, I was at a time in my life where, because of the history I've explained with my father, with my commitment to God, with the guilt, the feeling. I mean, I truly held a belief system that I was tainted, that I was disgusting, I was all these things. And I started just giving my body away. Like, just I was an object to a man. And then that, coupled with the belief system of the trophy wife thing, I truly believed that I was just an object to a man. And that was that, you know? So I was really trying to work through that. New York is a really interesting place to date, you know? So I was trying at that point to kind of just, you know, I felt just ecstatic to be in a new environment, and it was just intoxicating, the city. And so I was like trying to really start to reel that in, and you know, find a new identity for myself around my sexuality, and really just go into my gifts and my art and all the things I was doing. So right at the pinnacle of that, I was looking for a new apartment, and a man messaged me on Facebook, and we had a mutual friend who's my best friend in the whole world. And so he messaged me and said, have an apartment on the Upper East Side, and I wasn't planning on renting it out, but if you need a place to stay, you can stay there. I am actually living in LA right now, and I won't be back for like 6 months. And I thought this was like more New York magic, you know, like, oh my gosh. And so I'm like, okay, you know, we have this mutual friend who I really love and trust, and like, yeah. So I move into this apartment, and I'm just like beyond myself. He told me that I don't have to pay rent if I don't want to, that I can, you know, just be there because the apartment's not being used. So I was in this beautiful apartment on that Upper East Side, just, you know, coming from like the ghetto of Brooklyn where I was living. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, I'm moving up in life. So that was really exciting. About a week into me being there, it was Fashion Week in New York City, and big week in New York City. And he shows up, and he comes into the apartment, and I'm a little confused by the whole thing. Like, hey, I'm just, you know, I'm here for Fashion Week, and I'm only going to be here for the week. And I was like, okay, you know, I'll sleep on the couch or whatever. And he's like, no, it's fine. You know, he seemed accommodating, but I felt weirded out by the situation that he would show up a week into me being there without any notice. So, yeah, I don't know how detailed to get with this story, but there was a night he invited me out to Fashion Week with him, and he had a driver, and we went to this club that I was like, you know, at this club in this booth, like VIP booth with like Jude Law and all of the Victoria's Secret models and all these actors and models, and I'm just like, wow, you know, what is this, you know? And they all knew him, and he was very wealthy and well known. But at that point, even I was really skeptical of him. Just there were he was doing during that time. But I was kind of playing the part, playing along, like, okay, you know, he's letting me have his home. I'm gonna, like, you know, entertain this. So there was a part where I went into the bathroom, and he came in, and I'll skip some details, but he basically he took my head and slammed it against the bathroom sink, and that was it. I knew I was in trouble. And so yeah, he led me out to the car, and like forcefully, and went back to his apartment. And from there I endured 3 days, 3.5. It seemed like forever, so that half was important. 3.5 days of rape, and I was locked in the room, and there were just times where I didn't know if I was ever gonna get out. And this man was a heroin addict, and so he was shooting up, and there were actually other people in the apartment multiple times, and I would scream, and when I did, you know, he would come in, and I would get hit and silenced, and they didn't care that I was there. They knew what was happening, and they didn't care. Like a room, you know, an apartment full of people. So that was pretty terrifying. I remember at one point there was this picture on the wall, and it was like of this vase of flowers. And I remember every time he would come in, I would just look at the picture and stare at the picture while he had his way with me. And it was some sort of comfort or something. But so finally that one day he walks out of the room, and I could hear, I mean, at that point everything when you're in trauma mode, everything is really hyper sensitive, right? You're like hyper focused. And so he walked out of the room and I heard that he didn't lock it. I could he didn't lock it. And so I was like, okay, you know, and so I'm like, this is my out. And I waited probably about 4 hours. It was completely silent. And so I'm like, okay. And I remember I kept waiting because I was like, if I, you know, I don't know if people are in here. I can't hear anything. I hadn't heard anything in hours, but I was just like, I couldn't, you know, I was like, okay, finally, I'm like, I have to just go for it. So I bolted out the door and I happened, like, my bag was sitting like by the door. And so I picked that up and I ran. And I finally got out of there, but I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't know where I was going to live. I did get a hold of my work and I was fired because I wasn't there for 4 days with no call, and they didn't care why. This is New York. You're very replaceable. And so I sat on the side of just a street corner, and I listened to Little Girl Blue by Janis Joplin over and over and over and over and over. And Janice really knows what's up. I felt like she understood me. You know, I felt like someone was there for me. So I did that until a man, a taxi cab driver, very sweet Indian man, and he pulled over and got out of the car and said, "Do you need a ride?" And I said, no, I don't have any money. I don't. And he's like, well, just get in. And obviously he could tell I was not in a good state. And I had been hurt and I had bruises and so he got me in the car eventually, and we just drove in silence for a really long time. And then he started really slowly just kind of asking me some questions. And then he said, okay, there is somewhere for you to go. You have a friend here. And I'm like, no, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have any money. I don't have anywhere to go. And I just kept like a loop. And he said, no, there's somewhere for you to go. And so I had called my roommate, who I had moved out of her home, and asked her if I could, you know, come stay. And she took me to the hospital, and it all progressed from there. But yeah, it was a really terrifying and very disheartening time. I mean, it went from like full ecstatic about life, like all possibility is possible, to just buried in this little tiny hole. And I had severe PTSD. I would be walking on the subway and I would feel like he was following me. And so I had to get out and put my back against a wall, and I would just shake, and my back against the wall was like I would stay there for hours. Like I just wouldn't be able to move. I'd be on the phone with somebody and then I'd start whispering to them like, we can't talk. He's listening. He's listening. And it was frustrating because I knew that it was crazy. I knew that he wasn't following me or listening. Like a part of my brain knew that. But I was so convinced, like I could feel him at all times, like hovering over me. So yeah, eventually I went to a counselor that was recommended, and like a rape clinic or like a women's clinic in New York. And I remember sitting down with this counselor and just telling her, I've been raped. And she responded to me, and I didn't even get into the story or any of the details. And she responded to me like, girl, you're in New York City, every woman gets raped. And then I just froze. I just felt, okay, like there is no help, nobody cares. Yeah, so that was a big turning point for me. When I left that appointment, I just decided that I had to drop it right then and there, that I just had to move on with my life and keep going, and that no one cares and no one wants to hear the story and no one's going to help you out. And simultaneously, I had called my parents, and I left the hospital. I called my parents and I let them know what had happened. And I didn't hear from them for 4 months after that had happened. And in speaking to my mom, she called me 4 months later while I was at work and said, honey, how are you doing? How's work? And I just said, no, you don't get to be in my life. Like, how did I share that with you? And I just haven't heard from, how did you not jump on a plane? And that was when she opened up to me about her horrific trauma. And I started, for her at 5 years old, and how she froze and she didn't know what to do and she couldn't deal with it. And essentially it is like me asking a 5-year-old to like do something about my trauma, because there hasn't, she didn't have any resources either, to heal. So, I immediately found forgiveness and understood the situation, but it didn't take from my loneliness in it, and I just was so defeated.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your courage in sharing everything that you did. There are a lot of people who I want to applaud your power for standing in your truth and sharing that, because there are women out there who have experienced sexual trauma, who, grapple with this and seeking help. And I want to applaud your courage for so authentically sharing not only what happened, but your emotional, mental, spiritual state as a result of this very intense experience. When we were talking, you shared how that experience in New York and then what ensued with your parents, to your own point, it was one of the times when you felt the most alone in your life. Help us understand how that segued into the start of your spiritual journey, your healing journey.
Yeah, so I decided to move out of New York City shortly after that. Hurricane Sandy hit, and I was living on the Lower East Side, and it was horrible. And I decided right then and there, I can't be in a city, especially New York, for any kind of natural disaster. And this was in 2012. And so I packed my bags and I moved to Nantucket, which is a little island off Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, most of it's totally protected. The land is protected, and It's stunning. So it's this just beautiful island. And I became a runner because I just couldn't get enough of the nature, because I had only lived in cities from that point. So when I finally lived, on an island with these sunsets and deer and, little lightning bugs as I ran, and just like this, just nature healed me from the inside out. And I knew that nature was healing me, but I had no idea. I mean, it was the first time I had seen creeks and seen trees like this, and like been in the woods. And I knew I could tangibly feel the effects on my body, my spirit, emotions, everything, just healing me. And that is also where I found craniosacral and Reiki and yoga and other modalities. And I was hooked. That was it. And so I really dove into a lot of womb clearing and embodiment practices, because what happens many times in sexual trauma, and what happened to me, is that my nervous system, my body decided it is unsafe to be in this body. So I disconnected and I went up here, which was wonderful for my spiritual journey, because I wasn't connected to my trauma and I wasn't connected to my emotion. I was just kind of, up here, seeing like the bird's eye view of everything, which really helped me develop my spirituality. And then it came to this point of realizing how far I had come from my body. And then I thought I was over my traumas, and I thought I was totally healed. And then I came into my body and felt all of it and realized that it was all still there. And so, after my experience of being completely alone, and not only alone, but I felt so rejected by this counselor, by my family, I felt so rejected in my experience. And like, it's like hush hush, like you don't talk about your rapes, and you don't talk, And so I decided pretty immediately into my journey of embodiment that I would be the ear for any woman who needed help with their sexual trauma or had experienced anything like that, So yeah, that's now, now I'm in birth work, and I still get phone calls all the time for women that have experienced sexual trauma. And I would say I counsel them and give them practices and things like that. But ultimately, I just hold space and, validate these stories and show compassion and love, and let them know that they're not alone in this. And there's no comparison, There's no, oh, you've been through this and I've only been through that. Everybody has a story to be heard, to be heard and acknowledged. So
yeah,
at the end of that work.
I want to sort of reiterate my understanding and have you correct or add to it as you wish. The way I hear it is, as you began your healing journey, part of how you were led to approach it ended up with you sort of going more into your spiritual space and transcending your suffering through tapping ever so deeply into your spirituality. And in doing so, you began to help others until you realized that in some regards there was somewhat of a disconnect where you, although were operating from much more of a spiritual place and being okay with all the injustice that happened to your body and in life, that you realize that there was an opportunity for you to bring that healing more towards your body and how maybe you were engaging with in the world, maybe as far as your body language and whatnot. If that's accurate thus far, can you help us understand what were some of the signs, symptoms that helped you realize, hey, there's still work to be done, and the work, remains, primarily for my relationship with my body and making it feel that it's okay, and, start that healing.
Yeah, I think that I realized at some point, let's start with that moment where, I decided after that counselor was just like, look, you're not special. This happens to everyone. And I walked out onto the city street and was like, okay, this just has to be done. Like, this just has to be over. No one's going to help me. I don't know how to help myself. So it's done. And that's, I had to leave my body because there was so much trauma that had been done to it. There was no way to process it. So you get into this, they say the trauma modes are like fight or flight. And I always thought I was a fighter. That was why I thought I was a fighter. But I realized later that there's fight, flight, and freeze and mediation. And so at first I disassociated so that I could move on with my life, so that I could go get a job and put a smile on my face and make new friends and just do life. And I disassociated from it. And then I realized through many encounters, and then it actually took another encounter with someone attacking me.
I want to sort of make sure you have the space to continue sharing that for our audience.
Yeah, it is important, I think, for people to really be able to identify what type of survival trauma response they go into. And so, like I said, I always felt like I was a fighter.
Yeah.
And that was mainly because I was so in my masculine, because I was literally fighting for my life in so many situations. Yeah. And then I was on my own for so long. I've traveled alone. I've been to 27 countries by myself. And I've just been in this masculine, like, I'm on protector mode. So to realize that my trauma response was actually freeze was shocking to me. I realized I was frozen and that I had cultivated a life around my freeze mode, and I was still frozen. I was still unable to let people in. I was still not able to reach my trauma because I was in the response of it constantly, like autopilot. And so I had cultivated a life from this mode. And, I thought at the time I was, a lot of people were like, wow, Chelsea, you're so empowered, or you've gotten through so much. And I used to look at them like, well, yeah, isn't that what you do? But I had no idea that I hadn't actually gone through my trauma, that I had just had this frozen, let's just keep everything in place so that nothing goes awry. And I was associated. And so it was a shock to have that come in that way. And me have to really dive in in a new way into my traumas and into my embodiment experience, and look at what was stored in the closet, you know, when I thought that I was over it and I was just so strong and I just moved on from things. And you know,
Yeah.
it takes time, and it takes, honestly, what it takes is support. Because I did as much as I could on my own, and I'm really proud of that. But that is what actually kept me in that trauma response for so long.
Mhm. So help us understand so I'm picking up on a couple of things. Number one, the limit of the amount of work you could do on your own. So I'm curious to learn more about what were some of the practices that helped you better address the trauma within your body and to get healing there. And the second thing you talked about was support, right? And so what did that support look like for you?
Yeah. Um, some of the practices have been, I started, I think my first most profound shift in my healing was through Vipassana. And it's, you know, 10-day silent meditation, and it's in a very specific way. They call it brain surgery, really. And it is. So I kind of got obsessed with Vipassanas because I had so much shift in my life. And then I went on to really diving into the women's work, and I started going to a lot of women's circles, and then especially like women's festivals, like women's like 5-day events and things like this, where I was introduced to somatic work,
Mm,
somatic movement, dance therapy, breath work. Breath work was and still is probably my number one modality for moving things through. Um, and the community that I live in now and the community that I have built has been my support team.
mm,
I have worked with people one-on-one that have been wonderful. Um, you know, where I've kind of gone a little bit deeper with one person.
mhm,
Um, but just knowing that I have the support of my community. I held a women's circle in my community for years, and we're family. We're family. So knowing that I have cultivated the family that, you know, sees me and accepts me.
mhm,
And by the way, update on my family, they do as well. We've come a long ways and really addressed some issues head on. And they're just, they're also, I just feel so loved by them and so understood by them now that they're also like unraveling a lot of their traumas and being able to talk more openly, you know, coming from that generation of like hush hush everything. So I'm really proud of them. And yeah, healing relationships. As you heal your trauma, you are healing your relationships. And I
mhm.
didn't realize how isolated and alone I was, until I wasn't.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, you know, from when we were talking, I mean, this journey as a result of, not just what you've had to experience, but also as a result of all the healing that you've been able to experience and the community and support that you've experienced is one that's inspired you to be there for other women as well. Um, so share a little bit about that and what your aspirations and dreams are in this regard.
Hmm. Well, I feel like we're in a place and in a time where everyone is really yearning for community. That's like the main talk, I think, around everything is either community or romantic relationships. But either way, connection to others or another. And I think that it's just really imperative to understand that without going through your traumas and being seen and witnessed, and I have not figured out why it is so important to, and healing, to be witnessed, but it is a step that I have not been able to shortcut. You know, I've had to sit there and be witnessed in my trauma for it to really open up for me to go through it. And that in itself creates connection. So I think, you know, many of us want this, you know, ideal community living, but we're still so frozen in our own trauma. We're so, you know, we're so just afraid and kind of disconnected. And so, yeah, my bigger aspirations and dreams are that we really begin from the inside out to heal ourselves, to support the people around us, get to know your neighbors, you know, get to know the people at the grocery store, you know, like drop into conversation, be vulnerable. I think these things are just so important right now. And you know, really surround yourself with people who open you and who you trust, you know. Yeah, I think that we can feel isolated in any situation. We really can. I mean, that's always available to us. But when we actually just like gain this courage to step out of that shell and just see how many other people are waiting for that, it's like we're all like waiting behind our, you know, blanket, like who's gonna do it first? So have the courage to, you know, introduce yourself, to talk to people, to find people that, you know, you can relate with, you can dance with, you can cook food with. I mean, these are the things that I'm, you know, envisioning for our new earth, that it's just one big community. Yeah.
And I think that's a really good place to sort of bring everything full circle. I really appreciate how you sort of shared, you know, you took the first step as it relates to this episode in sharing and opening up and speaking of, and I believe deep down in my heart that your courage will travel through your voice to others who hear your words, will feel what they will feel in their body as a result of your courage and your journey and your aspiration. And they will make moves, however little, towards the direction of growing community and increasing support and increasing, you know, for the women out there, tapping into their voice, tapping more deeply into their power. I want to thank you once again for being so brave and sharing so deeply, so authentically, so freely. Are there any last words that you would like to share as we bring this episode to a close?
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling one thing for anyone watching. You know, I often watch things on the internet and I'm like, why can't I have that courage or that power? And I want you to know that stepping into this, Lion, thank you so much, because it was really Lion who gave me this space and allowed me to evoke these things and to and myself. I'm giving myself credit too for stepping up, but this isn't just easy or natural or just innate, and I don't have some special gift that you don't, that somebody else doesn't have. It takes courage and it takes trust, and I really just hope that everyone aligns with a lion or a friend that can help with this process to evoke this, because this has been a really deep journey for me for a couple weeks since Lion and I spoke, and it's opened places just in telling him my story. I have unlocked and unraveled so much since we had that initial meeting, and this is just a never-ending healing journey. And so know that we're all in this together. We're all doing the best that we can, and that we're here to support you. I'm here to support you. I know Lion's open to support you. And I just encourage anyone who feels the need to share their story it can be so healing. It has been for me, and I'm just so blessed to have this opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, for sharing and pointing out that, despite the courage that you've displayed, that there isn't something otherworldly about your courage, that this is something that we all have the capacity to build up to, because I think that's so important for everybody to realize that we all have that within us. And it's a matter of trusting the voice and experience of those of us who have walked this path, who are a little bit more forward, and feeling our authentic sort of sharing and how it's aided our healing journey. Mm-hmm. And then making the choice, making the cognizant choice to take that leap for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And knowing and feeling that community, sisters, brothers are there to hold you, despite some of the bumps that there might be in the road, right? Like, we as a society, we as a community, we as a world have a lot of work to do, but know that, there are those of us out there who are waiting on the other side if you decide to take that leap as part of your healing journey. Mm-hmm. So thank you once again, Chelsea, for sharing so deeply, so freely, so authentically of your spirit. And I want to thank our audience so much for their presence. I hope, I believe that this is going to be the beginning of something very big. Definitely for you, Chelsea, and as a result for me and our audience, and I'm very grateful for that. And with that, until the next episode, our lovely audience, I bid you love and light. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Get Out of Your Comfort Zone series. I hope it moved you and inspired you if you are feeling stuck with something in your life. If you would like to further connect with our guest, please see their contact in the description. Please consider taking a moment to rate this podcast. Please also consider showing us some love on your Instagram story. You can find our info in the episode description. Until the next episode, I wish you infinite love, and light. Thank you so much for tuning in.